Welcome everybody in the Off the Ball Network fandom and beyond back to your now Wednesday night affairs. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, after a brief technically 2.5 week hiatus, the Bunts and Bruises podcast is back and better than ever. As always, the Iceman is here with you to kick off season 2. We're just with a bang. We have an outstanding show ready for you guys today. We had a little bit of a break. I had to go back into the war rooms, prep topics. Guests, we're trying to plan a guest list proper for the first time in show history on a week-by-week basis. We're stepping it up here at BNB, and I, of course, cannot do it by myself. As always, joining me, my man, my guy, the Don of baseball, who one day, despite the fact having never played in the majors, he should be inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. My guy, James Barcia. James, how we doing?
Jurg, I cannot be more excited than now because let me tell you, if everyone thought season 1 was something, season 2, forget about it. But regardless, here we are on Wednesdays now, like you said, even at 7 p.m. So we didn't keep anything the same. We changed it all up here. We knew we had a great idea. We said, how can we make it better? And you're about to find out coming season 2. How else to make it better, though, than what we got planned today, Jurg? You got to tell me all about this craziness between the Hurricane and Carolina, I believe it is. I don't know, but you're about to fill me in. But not just you. You're going to fill me in with personally one of my favorite. If not, he's number 1 in my list. If he was a fantasy football player, he's Christian McCaffrey. Jurg, go ahead. I'm going to let you continue because you are the intro king. So go ahead. Take it away, man.
So, like James alluded to, we got, of course, being the name Bunts and Bruises, we got baseball and hockey news today. We're going to start off with some hockey news with a fun, fun happenings between the Montreal Canadiens and the Carolina Hurricanes and a little bit of a squabble that happened over the last week and a half or so. And then after that, we're going to be talking about the NHL's important decision regarding players in the Olympics, which has been a long time coming for some fans. And we're going to then transition over to Major League Baseball, where we're going to harken back to the trade deadline a little bit and talk about some of the names that were moved from there and how just a quick review of like how they've done since, any buyer's remorse on a couple of those deals. But like you said, James, we can't do it alone here. And what better way to start off season 2 than with one of just the best guests possible to have on, a friend of the show. I think everyone knew that for the first time he came on, but absolute friend of the show. Spoken a lot of hockey with this guy. He came on, wowed us with his baseball stuff. He is a just excellent writer. One of the best, actually, funny enough, regarding Carolina and Montreal. He had a fun little article that I'm sure we're going to get into when we go into the discussion about RFAs and the NHL. So this is just, the perfect guest for the Bunts and Bruises podcast, any podcast really, but for our podcast in particular. And we welcome him back. One of the best talkers on the microphone with us, Logan Lockhart. Logan, good to have you back, man.
Jurg, you're very kind. Thank you for the intro. James, it's great that I've been compared to Christian McCaffrey. That was maybe the greatest honor of the show. It's great to be here for season 2, episode 1, but being compared to Christian McCaffrey, that may have topped it right there. So James, Jurg, thank you for having me.
Of course.
What I found out, I figured let's just double it up. So we had to go with the guy with the same letter in his name, LL. That's it, because he's a legend. It's Larry Legend over here with Logan. So let's just keep it going. Season 2, baby. I'm ready. 2's everywhere, Jurg. 2's everywhere.
Two's everywhere. Hey, a J in my first name, J in your first name, LL. It's meant to be. It's meant to be. It would only be more funny if it was on episode 2 as well. But we have to bring a Logan on for episode 1. Come on, we got to start out hot. We got to set the standard for what this season is going to be, and we're going to get right underway with everything here. Like we talked about the little topic rundown we did before. Let's not banter any further. Let's get straight into it here. Logan, the Carolina Hurricanes and the Montreal Canadiens late in the NHL offseason. I hearken the late August, early September of the NBA and the NHL off seasons to kind of a dead period kind of for both leagues, where it's like there's still a little bit of news here and there and teams are preparing, but nothing really that important happens for the most part, aside from a couple professional tryouts in terms of the NHL and maybe the NBA, like a 2-way contract is going to get signed here by one of these teams. But, the Carolina Hurricanes, they did a little bit of a favor for us here, in recent weeks with the signing of the Montreal Canadiens youngster, no, not former Canadian, Jesperi Kotkaniemi to just a 1-year deal worth $6.1 million. Now, on the surface, we're going to break down what it means for hockey terms in and of itself, because that situation has only just a couple days ago has finalized itself. So we have the definitive answer of where Kotkaniemi will be playing. It is Carolina. But we're going to break down some of the details that led up to it because it was quite the story, Logan. So just so the people know from your perspective of everything that played out, just like what was your reaction to it as we were learning in the early stages of it, like, oh, Carolina's having some fun on this one.
Well, my reaction, first of all, when I first saw it, I'm saying to myself, okay, it's an offer sheet. They don't happen often anymore, but it's an offer sheet. When I saw the signing bonus, which was $20, literally, it's $20. And because of that, Sebastian Aho wears number 20. He was offer sheeted by Montreal 2 years ago of the Carolina Hurricanes. And people are looking at this as almost a payback offer sheet for what they did 2 years ago. That's when I said to myself, okay, the pettiness is real. It's a $20 signing bonus. So, Don Waddell in Carolina, he can say whatever he wants about, no, it's not revenge, it's not payback. But the $20 signing bonus has got to be one of the great comedic pieces I've seen in the NHL offseason in a long time. And like you say, in this type of offseason, especially at this time, August, September, it gets boring. It gets so boring that we're sitting here saying, when's football starting? Because honestly, the offseason's so boring. That's what happens every year. That changed, though. And I think we need to see more offer sheets. As much as GMs dread them and as much as there's a lot of integrity that's questionable, a lot of the times I think it's interesting. And I think that what we should also do for people who aren't aware of offer sheets in the NHL, we should compare different cases in different sports. It would be like, imagine if Kevin Durant earlier in his career was a restricted free agent and a team said, hey, let's offer sheet him and see if, at the time, Oklahoma City, let's see if they'll match it, right? It's one of those things. Now, Kotkaniemi is not the player Durant is, but the point is that offer sheets could be very significant.
Absolutely. We're very entertained by all the off ice stuff, and we'll get through that part actually real fast here. So like you mentioned, $20 signing bonus is just, one of the many stick in the craws of Marc Bergevin, who, by the way, was actually, I don't know if he just got on vacation or he was about to go on vacation at the time, just before the offer sheet was made to Kotkaniemi. And this actually forced him to delay that in order to handle everything. Because there is, in the NHL, when it comes to restricted free agents, when a offer sheet is accepted by an RFA, there is a 1 week period where the current team of that player is deciding, like, all right, are we going to match the contract, verbatim, or are we just going to let that player go? And the Canadiens, as expected, they took the entire week to decide it. And ultimately, they made the decision to let him go. I will say, in terms of how entertaining Carolina was with this, along with Bergevin not getting to go on vacation, along with the $20 signing bonus, not only the two best things to me was on Twitter, the Hurricanes Twitter. Not only did they put the signing up in English, they put it up in French to really piss off Montreal Canadiens fans, which was just, it was beautiful. But then, to me, like the bow on top, the cherry on top of the sundae was the fact that Don Waddell, if you read his statement of the immediate signing of Kotkaniemi, word for word, it was the exact same one that Bergevin gave of Sebastian Aho a couple of years ago. So it was just a pure, and this is not a bad thing, by the way. This is the kind of stuff I love. It was a pure petty power move by the Carolina Hurricanes. And this one actually succeeded because, as we've alluded to, the offer sheet was accepted by Kotkaniemi, and a week later, it was official. The Montreal Canadiens were going to let him go, and they allow him to go. So actually, before we talk about the hockey terms of it, James, I want to bring you on in this. Because I think James was at the tail end of his vacation when all this was happening, and I told him about it. He was like, what the heck is going on? James, what is your reaction to the whole RFA situation that happens in the NHL? Because kind of like what Logan alluded to, RFAs in the NHL it's a whole different beast compared to what it is in the NBA and the NFL. And I think Major League Baseball is probably the closest one in terms of protecting young players, but is still nothing to the same extent as what the NHL has in their system.
All this is crazy. There's so much going on right now in this whole story. You got $20 over here. You got the pettiness of the Canes Twitter posting in the front. I don't even know where to start, Jerry. This is insane. I had to break out the glasses. It's unfortunate. I'm getting old where I need glasses to read a computer. But regardless, this whole thing is just crazy. But you're right, especially the restricted free agent part. I'm trying to get a full grasp of it. When you guys are saying they're offer sheeting somebody, why is it not as common anymore in the NHL? Because I noticed that was the first thing Logan said. So that's my first question to start off.
Well, it's definitely, I guess I can call it unwritten rules almost in a way. There's a code. That player belongs to the team. And another general manager, yes, they can go offer sheet somebody, but it's almost like, an FU in a way. It's, we're going to do our best to put you in a very difficult position. And it's not good. If you were a general manager, and I was a general manager, and I offer sheeted one of your players, you wouldn't be too happy with me. And our relationship would kind of be hindered because of that. And guys don't want to do that. It's a business, and in work and in the real world, you want to keep good relationships with people, and offer sheeting someone is probably not the best way to go about it.
All right, I get that. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Now, I don't know, though. Especially me, you can ask Jurg. I'm like the king of petty. I still be looking at my girlfriend because she washed my Uggs one day, and I was just like, but they were so clean, and then you got the color out, and she's going to kill me later, but that's a different story for a different day. So my next question is, the $20. Someone break that down, please, because I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Like, he signed an offer sheet that the signing bonus was $20. Like, it doesn't sound like a smart move for him either. So, can someone break that down in terms for the casual fan as well, please? And yes, we are back, and we're better than ever. Damn it!
The $20 is supposed to represent the number that Sebastian Aho wears on the ice. He wears the jersey number 20. Montreal offer sheeted Sebastian Aho 2 years ago. So just as a payback and to be petty, the signing bonus on this contract for Kotkaniemi was $20. It's a very good contract. Forget the signing bonus, $6.1 million. That's very rich.
I know that much in hockey. I know the numbers are comparable to the NFL, but that's kind of what makes it more related to the NFL because they're not making this restricted free agent money like Jurg mentioned in the MLB. So there's a whole lot going on with this situation. I'm still trying to fully get a grasp on it, but it seems like this has to be probably the most petty free agent move out of the entire NHL free agent period this year, if not like the last 10 years, most likely.
Honestly, because like Logan said, it is complete counter to what Montreal tried to do a couple years ago. Because as I mentioned before on the podcast, the Carolina Hurricanes, in terms of spending, they know they have a ceiling to what they're allowed to spend, because when you look at websites like Cap Friendly, like, yes, the first thing you see is the cap hit, but remember, cap hit and true salary for a season are two very different numbers in regards to NHL contracts. So when the Canadiens offered Sebastian Aho that contract 2 years ago, it wasn't necessarily the cap hit that Carolina had a problem with. It was the salary structure of the deal. Earlier this offseason, with the Seattle Kraken signing Philip Grubauer to his contract, they made it, I believe, a front-loaded deal, and the NHL actually told them that they need to restructure it a little bit because of rules in the new collective bargaining agreement, where it's like the later years, it can only be a certain amount more percentage-wise than year one. So stuff like this is actually relatively common. Like, teams actually, I think more so in the NHL than a lot of the other sports, they need to care about the minutia of yearly salaries when they're giving these kinds of deals out. And that's ultimately what some of those numbers represented. But of course, the number one thing, just the pettiness. I love it. I love it so much. But so moving away from that for a second, let's actually move on to the hockey aspect of it to finish it off. I think it was a great deal. When it first happened, like, my opinion on the situation changed from when I first heard about it to essentially the day or two before, where when the offer sheet was first submitted and accepted, I thought, okay, Montreal, they only have $4 million in cap space. So yes, they need to make a move, but you got to keep Kotkaniemi, right? Like, for some reason, I just don't understand why it didn't end up working out. His rookie season was pretty good. He played in 70 plus games. He had a 34, 35 point season. He showed some, signs early on. And for a fact that, honestly, back in his rookie year, I thought they brought him up too early, and he was still able to put up that solid of a season. It shows you, like, there's talent there. Year two, I believe there were some injury issues. Like, he didn't get to play a full season, and he had a rehab stint that he had to do in the AHL. And then this year as well, didn't necessarily play the whole season, didn't play great. Mind you, I think, it goes to both the player and the team. But then in the playoffs, these last two times where we've seen Montreal, he's scored 9 goals in 29 career playoff games. So a third of the time he plays in the playoffs, like every third game, he's going to give me a goal by the numbers. That's pretty good in my opinion. Now, is it $6 million a year? Not necessarily, but because it was just a 1-year deal, at first I thought, okay, Montreal can swallow this. They could deal with it just for 1 year, and then they go from there. But then all the details come out. I believe a day or two after this happened, Logan, in Montreal, it was reported that Jonathan Drouin was apparently going to start, having some time at center this upcoming season, potentially. That combined with the idea when it comes to RFAs, when you match a RFA offer to one of your guys, so when you match an offer sheet, you cannot trade the player for the whole first year. It is a legitimate no movement clause, not like the current no movement clauses where it's like, okay, pick here that you don't want to go and we may send you here. No, it was an ironclad, he will not get moved. So because it was actually a 1-year deal, Montreal essentially was going to sign Kotkaniemi to 1 year and they can't trade him for anything. Right. And then you add in the fact that had they tried to qualify him next year, the base qualifying offer would have to start at 6.1 because that was the cap hit assigned by Carolina. So ultimately, this was just a masterful deal by the Carolina Hurricanes to do everything they could to make it so Montreal wouldn't match the contract. And at the end of the day, they didn't. He goes to Carolina, which I actually saw reports, it was either earlier today or yesterday, that they're likely going to play Kotkaniemi on the wing now instead of at center, which I think is not a bad decision at all, considering the talent in that forward group. You could stick him anywhere. I think he's going to play with someone talented there, whether it be Aho, Svechnikov, Teravainen on the opposite wing. Like, there's potential there where Kotkaniemi could find some success here. So I think overall for both sides, you could see the reasons why it was done. I think while it was pettiness for Carolina, if he starts to play pretty well, they can extend him immediately this upcoming season. And I think January 1st is when you can re-sign up players to from that you got in the offseason for just 1-year deals. And they could probably re-sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal that's worth less than the $6 million a year cap hit. So that's a win for Carolina. And then for Montreal, they got an extra 1st and 3rd round pick, which they then used. So let's move on to some of the aftermath of this deal. They used that 1st round pick conditionally in a deal and a 2024 second rounder with and they sent that to the Arizona Coyotes for a Christian Dvorak, who can play on the wing, but the key part is that he can play center. And Logan, I think this was the key thing because a lot of teams, when some of this stuff happens, they don't always have a backup, right? And I think Montreal, you saw in the offseason, they lost Philippe Danault early, and now with this Kotkaniemi thing, you got worried. It's like, who the heck is going to play behind Nick Suzuki? And then they pull off the Dvorak deal. So, Logan, I want to throw it to you. Like, how heady of a play was it for Montreal? They wasted absolutely zero time. It's like the second it was confirmed Kotkaniemi to Carolina, Dvorak to Montreal within the next couple hours. So, how heady of a play was that by the Canadiens?
I think Montreal came out really well here, and they did their best under the circumstances and the position they were put into. Like you said, it was a tough situation with not only the money, but what are you going to do at center now? Kotkaniemi, this is a guy who was drafted in 2018. So we're not talking about a veteran player here. This is someone who's still going to grow. So what do? I think they came out well. I think Dvorak is a real good player. Now, it's interesting in Arizona, he played with Connor Garland for a lot and really produced. He's not going to have Garland anymore. He's going to be on his own in Montreal. We'll see how that works out. I think the fit in Carolina for Kotkaniemi is good on the ice. And remember, the Hurricanes, they had money to play with. And Nedeljkovic, he went to Detroit. Dougie Hamilton went to New Jersey. There's a lot going on there where they said, you know what, we can do this. We can bring him in. I'm sure that, speaking of the Olympics, which we'll get into, Team Finland, Kotkaniemi, Sebastian Aho, that should be a pretty good fit as well. So there's a lot to like about the fit, but I think Montreal came out great. I think the deal to get Dvorak, it was smart. You basically didn't give up anything because you got a 1st round pick from Carolina. I think it's a good move. And Montreal, they also have flexibility. Shea Weber, that's a big cap hit. That's not going to be on the books this year. He's injured. And Carey Price, he's had injury concerns here and there. We'll see what happens to him. But I think it's flexibility from both sides. Montreal came out well. Carolina, they got a lot to deal with now with Kotkaniemi. What's he going to get paid after year 1? We'll see. But I still like the fit on the ice strictly.
Yeah, when you talk about, a situation like this, when we go past all the fun of it, you could really say for both teams, like it just makes sense, right? For Carolina, you add a young, talented player who he's like 21 years old, right? There's so much room for him to grow, especially with the talent there. Like you said, he's going to play in the Olympics with one of his teammates. The chemistry there is just going to grow more. It's just one of those things where it's like for Carolina, this is low risk right here because it's just a 1-year deal too. You didn't sign him to a 3-4 year deal at that cap. It was just 1 year. And then you can extend him to the earliest convenience, potentially at a lower hit. So there's so much good there for Carolina. And like we said with Montreal, it is very rare, I think, across sports where when a team loses a player of Kotkaniemi, whether it be based off of talent, potential, whatever you see, for them to not waste any time. It's almost like Bergevin kind of planned this halfway through. It's like, okay, we're going to let him go and then we're going to make this deal. I'd imagine this deal with Arizona was probably set at least 2-3 days before we saw it reported. I just think it was a masterful stroke by the Canadiens overall, and just fitting way, honestly, for the whole thing to end. And, you know, it was a nice little debacle while it lasted. And then when all the dust settles, it's like, you know what? It was good for all sides. It really was. Logan, because I mentioned at the top, I want to just like brief, you to talk about it a little bit, but the article you recently put on Fansided of, crazy RFA stories in the NHL. When you were doing that article, like, can you just talk about like how fun it was to kind of look back at some of these restricted free agent offers? And it's like, wow, some of these deals were crazy.
It was a lot of fun because you go through it and you see a lot of big names. You go, wait, he was offer sheeted? Because a lot of them just get swept under the rug because the team matches it and we never hear about it ever again. But in some cases, a lot went down. And, back then there would be an arbitrator that would have to step in and decide what the return would be in the compensation. And in some cases, like we saw, it was Scott Stevens. He was the compensation in different deals. So it's not like what it was then. Now there's set compensation. If it's a certain cap hit, you get this draft pick or that draft pick. But then it was different. I mean, you have someone, literally, you got someone, an attorney, who's going to decide who you're going to give up and give to another team. It's really interesting, but it was a lot of fun seeing all the big names and seeing some of the desperation by some general managers. It's funny. We're in August. You mentioned things slow down. That desperation sometimes ramps up when things slow down. Okay, let's make a move now, right? And going through that, that's what I saw.
I can say with experience, when you have too much time in your own head to think, not necessarily a good thing. Right. But moving on from the unwritten rules, because we kind of have alluded to and Logan mentioned before with RFAs in the NHL, it's kind of unwritten. You just allow teams to work it out with their players. That's honestly, like, we're talking about Montreal this entire time. Vancouver still hasn't signed Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes yet. Like, that in and of itself is a topic for another time right there. Like, they've had the entire offseason, they still can't figure that out right now. So that's something I think like 2-3 weeks from now we got to revisit that situation because what the heck is going on, Vancouver? But from unwritten rules to now written rules. So let's talk about it really quick. The Olympics are going to be way more interesting now upcoming for 2022 because NHL players will once again be allowed to compete. So kind of like what we talked about before, following the 2014 Sochi Olympics, I think a year or so after it happened, if I'm not mistaken, within that timeline, there was a rule by the NHL and Gary Bettman that NHL players would no longer be allowed to represent their countries in international competition while they were on an NHL team. Obviously, for former NHL players, like free agents, there was flexibility there. Jaromir Jagr, the ageless wonder, he does what he wants, so he probably was still playing at that time. But ultimately, it was a point of contingency years ago now, at this point, about 5-6 years ago, because of injuries that were happening to players. Particularly, I remember I think with Team Canada, is like Steven Stamkos, I remember, got injured. John Tavares, I don't know if he just barely avoided an injury or if he was also injured as well. So like the whole point of the NHL doing that years ago was to avoid a higher risk of unnecessary injuries away from the teams, because teams were very upset after those 2014 Olympics of how some of their players came back. They were tired because while the league takes a break during the Olympics, they have like a couple week time off. While it's nice for a lot of the players, it's not so nice for the guys that were there. Like, they get guys back who just played, against the best talent in the world, right? So that was a whole issue the entire time. And now just recently, the decision was made for the NHL to allow their players to compete again. So, Logan, I'm going to throw it to you immediately. When you heard this, like, we both could only imagine how so many hockey players were like cheering of this. Like, yes, I get to play internationally again. Like, how good of a decision is it for the league to allow this to happen? Because, like, and we'll probably talk about a little bit, like, even though I forget when it happens, but like Major League Baseball has the World Baseball Classic, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't see or hear, general managers saying it's like, I don't want my guys to play in that. They're allowed to. So kind of like for the NHL players, how important is it for them to now be able to play for their countries again?
It's important for the guys like Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews. It was getting a little worrisome that they were never going to get that moment like Crosby had when Crosby was relatively young in 2010 in the Olympics in Vancouver, and he had his big moment there for Team Canada, so he got his chance. So it was getting worrisome. Now, there are a lot of issues associated with it, though. The NHL, the IOC, who's going to pay for what? Who's going to pay for insurance? The NHL definitely doesn't want to do that. There's a lot going on there. So, it's good. It is. I thought the Olympics in 2010, on the North American smaller ice, that's when it was dynamite. The competition, it was an incredible tournament. And in Sochi, I was a little more mixed on it. It got a little tough to watch at some points. The big ice, teams were playing real defensive. In particular, Team Canada just found a formula where it was just way too dominant. No one was scoring on Team Canada. So it was tough to watch at points. So we're not going to be on that North American ice in 2022, this coming February. But I'm hoping that it is a return, and it is a bit nostalgic for people who remember 2010, even Torino in 06 and 2014. And we're going to see a lot of new faces. This is what I'm excited about. Matthews in the Team USA jersey, McDavid and McKinnon, who didn't get to as well for Team Canada.
Right.
So there are going to be new faces as well, all across here, and for the other countries as well. And Russia has a bunch as well. We're going to see Kucherov. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I just saw a picture like a day or two ago of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and it was Vasilevsky, it was Kucherov, and it was Sergachev with the Stanley Cup. And I just, in that moment, I'm like, oh, Russia has some guys on that Olympic team this time around. They're going to be very dangerous. Bars, I want to throw this to you really fast. When it comes to international competition, of course, we just had like the Summer Olympics pass. And, you know, never really anything in the Summer Olympics when it comes to this. Of course, the NBA, it was like an old rule where it's like they didn't allow professional players for a while, and then they finally did in 92, of course, was the dream team and all. So when you hear this, that the NHL is finally allowing their players, like they're going to give them the right to play internationally again, like what is your reaction like to think of the league not allowing their guys? Like, did that make sense to you? And now does it make sense that they're allowing them to go back?
I mean, when you're looking from the league standpoint, you understand why they don't want their guys to play, because it's simply just profit to them. They don't really look at these guys as humans, if we're being quite honest. They look at them as the item. They are exactly the product, and they're what makes them the money. So is it worth the risk? No, it's not when you're a team owner. But from what I was reading, was little to no negotiation on this. The players wanted it so bad, it was just like, you have to do it, because if not, you don't got that product. So it was the risk finally outweighed, the reward finally outweighed the risk, where now you're going to get the international play. And honestly, I love it, because it's just something different about international play, whether it's basketball, baseball, soccer. You just see it when you got the stars not playing in their usual jersey, but they're wearing their country's uniform. It's just something, even if you don't watch the sport, you become a very patriotic does patriotism work internationally? Either way, you become a very patriotic person. You watch that team. You become the biggest fan of that sport. During the World Cup, I swear to God, I am like Landon Donovan talking on the TV, pointing out plays and stuff. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you do get interested. Like, for example, Logan mentioned the 2 different sizes of hockey ring. I didn't even know that was a thing. I assumed they were all the same size. So now here I am Googling it, and it's about 15 feet wider. Sorry, the glasses issue. It's about 15 feet wider, and the neutral zone's a little longer too. And I think that's kind of crazy, because like Logan said, even if you're not Canada's Canada. Of course, they're going to be a dominant team. But let's just say you're not a Canada. You're another team who doesn't have as strong players. You can find that formula to actually lock it down and use that to your advantage, because what might not work in the NHL with all this extra space may work out here. It could be like college with Jim Boeheim and his 3-2 zone, 2-3. Either way, you get my point, fellas.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's completely different when it comes to internationally. With hockey, and it's like, well, Canada for the most part, like people always expect, like, okay, Canada's going to win, this is their sport. They're like, you get the upsets here and there. Like in I forget, I believe it was 06 when Sweden won the gold. Like Henrik Lundqvist being the backstop to that team, and the players that they had, just the it showed you, it's like, okay, well, Canada may be the country that, you know, people like to joke about, you know, those that don't watch hockey. Internationally, the talent is there, and it's grown exponentially. Like Logan kind of mentioned, we've dropped a couple of the guys, but Aho and Kotkaniemi are going to be playing for Finland. They're both below like 24, 25 years old. The fact that they're going to get this chance now, they're going to be playing for Finland for like the next 3 Olympics, right? And what's his name? Capo Kakkonen, the backstop for the Minnesota Wild. If he gets better, if he keeps taking levels to his game, he has a chance at helping Finland get medal well in the Olympics. So the opportunity here for these young faces in the NHL to get to be on the world stage, because we always talk about with the Olympics, we mainly say this for the summer, but it's the case in winter too. It's the world stage. More eyes are on you. More people are paying attention. Casual fans will watch. Maybe people that don't really watch hockey will actually watch it for the first time. And like Logan said, with the Sidney Crosby golden goal in 2010, you get that moment. And when you make that moment, you could create a legacy for yourself, and your name will be remembered. And that, to me, I think, coincides with the fact that ESPN and TNT, the next decade of NHL coverage is up to them. So I think this is honestly, Logan, I'm sure this, I think this had to have played, a factor in the ultimate decision by the NHL, where with the opportunity of being on ESPN and TNT and now the Olympics coming so soon, it's like, okay, let's just put our players out there. Because I think the NHL knows, as good as hockey is, like it needs to keep growing. And the Olympics is that way where it's like, to not have had the guys in 2018, like it almost, at least to me, it kind of feels like there was a little bit of a half step back when it came to growing the game. And I think this chance with, at the same exact time with ESPN having games and TNT, like I think this was just like, perfect place, perfect time in regards to the NHL players returning.
No, absolutely. It's great timing. And with all the young talent, it makes it even better. And it's especially fun for guys like us. I mean, we talk about these players on their respective teams throughout the year, and we're not talking about guys on the world stage. We're talking about our NHL and our NBA and our NFL and all our players. But then for those 2 weeks, they're on the world stage. And the rest of the world is seeing the guys that we talk about on a daily basis. And it makes it even more fun for guys like us, the guys who really follow and really talk about it every day, right? So it's fun in that way. And I'm just excited to see some of these players. The line combinations, people are already at it, projecting how each roster will shape up. It's going to be a lot of fun. Canada, there's going to be players there that have never represented Canada at all. And here they are for the first time, same with the U.S. team.
Yeah, you're going to have guys who haven't represented Canada in international competition since the World Juniors for a couple of them. And it's going to be big. So I'm excited for it. I think we all are. I'm sure one Vegas Golden Knights player is going to make one of these teams, and James is going to hook onto that country for the Olympics.
It's going to be the greatest team ever, I swear.
Of course. Let's send Vegas. Let's just send Vegas to the Olympics, even though they'll disappoint us at the end of the day, like they always do in the playoffs as well. We might as well, just for the fun of it.
Where was your team?
Yeah, fair point. Moving on from all the hockey talk, of course, with the name of the podcast says it all. We're now going to have a smooth transition here to the baseball side of things. And in the baseball world, kind of like I was talking before, how, late August, early September, this is like kind of I'd say the dog days of the NHL and the NBA off seasons. We just have gotten past the dog days of summer for Major League Baseball now, as we are in September. And over the next 3.5 weeks, we're going to be having the playoff picture get finalized for these teams. And we're going to definitively see what the matchups are essentially by October for the most part. Get records here and there kind of indicate, but for the most part, we know in certain situations who's making it, who's not. So as playoffs ramp up here, we're going to be definitely talking baseball in depth. And what better way than to grade some teams that made some decisions back in July. So, James, I'm going to throw it over to you. Sum up for the people. What are we about to be doing for the next half hour or so on the podcast?
Well, I had a lot of free time on my 12-hour delay at the end of my vacation. I thought we should start researching some of these players that got traded after the trade deadline and see how they did. So I looked up a bunch of these players, and I figured, you know what? Let's give the people and show the results, show what people have actually made a difference to the teams that they joined and what people have just, they joined the team. And I figured what better comparison and who better talk about it with than the guy we first initially talked about the trade deadline with, and Mr. Lockhart himself. So I guess there's no better way to start this than let's talk about it with the one player who got traded from your Texas Rangers, who you drew his name out immediately once we asked what move should we expect from them. And that is Mr. Joey Gallo, Logan. What is your opinion on how he's doing with the Yankees? Is this somewhat expected of him due to the fact that, he's Joey Gallo. He's known to strike out. He's known to go on these cold streaks. Currently, since joining the Yankees, he's hitting a 130 with 61 strikeouts and 151 plate appearances. My apologies. With only 6 home runs. So 13 RBIs as well. It's not what you want, especially the guy who's batting from your 2-hole. So, Logan, what's going on here with Mr. Joey Gallo?
There's just one word to describe Joey Gallo with the Yankees. That's streaky, right? I mean, in the Bronx with that short porch in right field, I mean, that seemed like a paradise for a guy like Joey Gallo and Anthony Rizzo. And Gallo is really going to enjoy it, I think, once October comes, if the Yankees can secure their playoff position. I think of Gallo at the end of the day, all he does is give an extra threat in the Yankees lineup. And I think if the Yankees do end up in the postseason, whoever they play, if they get past the wild card game and they're going to get into a full tilt series, I think that pitching staff is going to be well aware of who the Yankees have. And it's just an extra threat. You know, they needed left-handed bats. I understand he's not hitting for a high average. I think Joey Gallo himself has said in the past he doesn't even care about average. He's just a guy that's going to look at OPS and different stats like that. I also have heard Joey Gallo say he hates striking out, which I find ironic so much. And he just doesn't like the strikeout. I heard him say that when he was with the Rangers a few years ago. And I'm thinking he strikes out more than anybody. He must really not enjoy playing the game most of the time.
I mean, that's like a pig saying they don't like rolling in poop, you know? It goes against what's going on over here. And you said it best, Logan. It just doesn't, it's very ironic, I guess is the word. It doesn't make sense because that left porch was built literally for someone like Joey Gallo. So the fact that he's not helping you produce runs, but he did bring a little something to the locker room, I guess you'd say, a little zing into it because they did start winning a couple games, but now they are back on a little bit of a cold streak. And at first, I don't recall his first couple games. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm almost positive Joey Gallo had a hot first 3 games when he was with the Yankees. That's where the whole Italian stallion thing started coming from with Barstool and him and Anthony Rizzo. So speaking of, let's talk about his teammate who got traded from the Chicago Cubs. He's actually doing quite well for the Yankees. He was exactly what they needed at first base because he is showing that gold glove and what a difference a great first baseman could do. Just strictly due to his defense because, you know, Gleyber Torres, he's not a great shortstop, and Urshela was out a little bit at third. So those throws to first probably haven't been as crisp, but when you have a gold glove like Anthony Rizzo, he stretches for every inch, and you've seen it. I've reposted it on Twitter multiple times. This man could go on his pinky toe somehow and stretch out 10 feet and then still scoop up the ball. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. But since he's joined the Yankees, he's actually provided a bat. It's not as much pop as you want from an Anthony Rizzo, but he's showing he's playing better than when he was in Chicago. He's had 4 home runs for 14 RBIs. He's actually stolen 2 bases. That's not something you see a lot from Rizzo anymore. And he's batting a 260 compared to the 248 he was batting in Chicago. Is there anything you think besides, hit more home runs that Anthony Rizzo could do to keep amplifying this team?
Well, I think what Rizzo has done along with his on-field play is create this competition of Luke Voit. And now Luke Voigt's on the bench saying, where's my chance? I led the league in home runs last year. What's going on? So I think it creates a dynamic, which could be healthy for the Yankees. You kind of want that fire. You want guys who are hungry to earn their opportunity. And I think with Luke Voit and the injuries he's had, this was perfect for him to say, you know what? I know Rizzo is here. I want to play at first base, and I want to be in that 9 guys who are in the lineup just as much as anyone else. So I think this is healthy for the Yankees. It's good they created competition. I thought the Red Sox missed a big opportunity to bring in Anthony Rizzo. That's exactly the kind of player they needed. So I understand that people in Boston are saying, no, we don't need him now. You know what? I mean, at first base, it's going to be really important. And the Yankees brought in guys. Rizzo's one. Hey, it's not that long ago. They broke a 108-year curse with the Chicago Cubs. The experience is there to do some special things. So I think they're going to like him in New York already that they have, but continuing going forward.
Honestly, I love how you mentioned the competition he's brought into the locker room with Luke Voit, because Luke Voigt's been, like you said, there's a fire there. And not only is there a fire in Luke Voit, there's a fire in that whole locker room because there wasn't really a leader before he showed up. And, everyone knows when he was in the Cubs, he was the captain. He might have been up and down when it came to the stats and his at-bat appearances, but he always was the captain. There was no doubt about that. And it's good to see that he's bringing that to the Yankees as well. But moving on, we're going to talk about one of his teammates that were there who helped him win that World Series. And that's going to be a Mr. Chris Bryant, who's now with the best team in the league. I don't know how you could argue with the way they just been playing all season. It's kind of crazy because at first you were questioning it. Even halfway through the season, you were still questioning it. But how can you question it after, 100 games so far, or whatever the number is? But he is batting his stats actually have stood pretty average with how he was playing in Chicago, but he was exactly the player that they needed in San Francisco. He's had 6 home runs, 14 RBIs, 4 stolen bases, and he's batting a 268, which is just in line with his 267 in Chicago. Was this the move that the Giants need to be able to win that World Series? Do you think he has what it takes to take them there and become that MVP player when he won his former ring?
Well, with the Giants, it's almost been by committee. And I don't think that Bryant or one guy in particular can actually own that label and say, I'm going to take you to the promised land. I think Bryant's versatility on the field and what he's shown, that was perfect for San Francisco. Bryant's shown he can play at third base. He can go to the outfield. With Evan Longoria having question marks about his health, he hasn't been on the field that often for the Giants this year. I think that was perfect. The fact that Bryant can really play anywhere that they ask him to, that was also perfect. I thought this was the right move for the Giants. And that was the only thing they did at the trade deadline. Let's not remember. I mean, there were a lot of teams that were active. The Yankees made how many trades? The Giants, one trade. It was Chris Bryant. And I felt that was the recipe they needed to do. Just bring in one guy. They can bring the lineup together. It's been a team built on pitching this year. They just needed that one guy. Bring the versatility, bring all that together. And I think the Giants are well positioned for the playoffs.
Yeah, you talk about defensively, like when we spoke about Rizzo and the Yankees, Bryant has started in all 3 outfield positions for the Giants for a couple of games in his tenure so far. Like James said, like his offensive numbers are just about the same from when he was with the Cubs to now this season. But I think kind of like what we said with Rizzo, it's the versatility that he brings. It's that experience, like the recent championship experience that he brings to that team is just like, that's something you can't teach. Like a guy who's won a championship, who knows what it takes. That's something that when you bring it into the locker room, you need to have. And I think with the Giants, kind of like what you said, Logan, like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Like no one player can own it on that team, but they all can take that role on a different game, on a different night. And in the playoffs, that's typically what you need, where it's like on any given night, one of your players can step up and hit that home run in like the bottom of the 6th when you need to tie up the game or you're making a comeback. And Chris Bryant can be that guy to deliver in that spot. So I think we're talking about, was it the right trade? I think it's pretty hard to argue, especially if they can, clinch the NL West title here and get home field advantage against whoever the wild card game winner is going to be, especially if it's the Dodgers. That's pretty valuable in a best of 5 series.
Yeah, you know what? And whatever the playoff matchup is, it's going to be unbelievable. If it's the Giants and the Dodgers or vice versa, whoever has home field, I mean, I can't wait, honestly.
It's all me and Jurg have been talking about for almost half the season. It's just how insane the NL West is and how all 3 teams are fighting for or could make the playoffs realistically. But we're going to go ahead, move from the West, start talking about the East, and we're going to talk about a trade that I was very excited about when it happened. Now I'm like decently whatever about it, but I still like the player. I think it's going to work out in the future. We should have got pitching, but regardless. And that is a Mr. Javier Baez, who, yes, Jared, give me the thumbs down. I love it, to be honest. If he gets mad at the fans and it helps him do better, or we start winning games, which we have been doing as of late, I'm all for it. Thumbs down me as much as you want, baby. He has been batting .261, which was actually a little lower, boosted up of recent. 6 home runs and 12 RBIs. Jurg, I'm going to throw this one to you first because you were one of the first, if not the first person I texted when this trade went down. I was golfing and I just started yelling, which is exactly what you don't want to do on a golf course, but I was very excited. So, Jurg, how do you think this move is so far working out for the Mets, with him thumbs downing us? Can we expect Javi Baez to be back next year?
Oh, man. So that's actually 2 different questions. So in terms of, I think we could say this for all 3 Cubs players where they've gone, is that there was something needed in all those locker rooms. I think whether Baez is there or not, I think the Mets go through this, stretch that they've had recently where they were going to lose the grip in the NL East. They were always going to lose the division lead there because they had never built it up, despite the fact they had ample opportunities early on. They just did. And now that Javi Baez is there, I think he's easily more of a help than a hurt when it comes to that. He brings that energy. We're talking about leadership and things like that. Just like energy is something that I actually value a little bit more than probably most people would in a locker room. And I think Javier Baez brings that energy to that locker room, kind of like this bravado of when he steps up to the plate. Like he expects the best of himself on any, of course all players do, but he expects, like when he goes up there, he thinks he could probably hit a home run off of any pitcher in the league, as he should. He's a talented player. He's won a World Series, been an all-star, all that. And I think that's the kind of player. I definitely agree. Like the Mets should have added some more pitching, especially eventually with DeGrom getting a bit dinged up, having to do rehab starts. But that aside, I think they needed that kind of hitter in the lineup where it's there mentally. You can't teach up here to have that level of swagger and confidence. And I think Javier Baez was the right person for that. Yes, though, like honestly, when I did the whole thumbs down thing as a joke, I loved it, honestly. Like so many people bashing him about it, where it's like this is why, like baseball and hockey, we are akin, where it's like when players actually show, a little bit of emotion, they get dogpiled on by the fans. And it's just like, yet you want the players to show this, and yet you crucify them. I didn't hate it at all. I absolutely loved it. I find it very entertaining. And if we were doing a show at that point, like we would have had a ball with that on the episode for sure. But I think Javier Baez was definitely like the guy to have there. I think it was a great trade. There's been ebbs and flows to it, yes. I forget, after that first home run he hit, like there was a little bit of a rough stretch, especially him and Lindor, like compounding that together didn't help. But they both played pretty well recently, and no better time. The Mets need to get back, because I think the only way they're going to make the playoffs, I think you can say this for any of the top 3 NL East teams, the only way they're going to make it is whoever wins that division. So it's critical time here. And if Javi Baez, if he brings in that swagger, if he starts playing well like that, that's just perfect. In regards to your second question, kind of a short answer, like, do they bring him back? I don't know. Like Steve Cohen, the thing that makes me say no is just the fact that he paid so much for Lindor, and already you're starting to have some questions about that contract. And it's like, do you want to take that risk with Baez? Like, Baez isn't going to be that much, right? Like, I don't think he should be commanding that kind of salary, but could I see a team offering Baez like $25 million a year to take him away from the Mets? Absolutely. And will the Mets match that? I don't know.
So, Logan, I'm going to start off with that big question for you now. Do you think Javier Baez comes back? And aside from that, I want your opinion as an outside New York area opinion of what do you think of the whole thumbs down situation? Are you in support of it? Do you not like it? Do you think it helped us out the way I think?
Well, actually, I never even thought about the perspective that you just brought up, the fact that, well, you know what, if that makes them play better, then good, do it. I think actually you've kind of put an interesting thought in my head right there, because, before I'm thinking, you know what, I can see the fans getting on these two guys, Lindor in particular, knowing what the team's going to be paying him. But the thing about Baez is, the guy's been here for 10 minutes and he's already having encounters with not only the New York media, but the New York fans. And I find the whole thing entertaining. Will he come back to the Mets? I would be shocked if he did. And I'll tell you why. I thought this trade was a Band-Aid for the Mets. I thought that they haven't been healthy all year. And I thought Baez, bringing him into the lineup, was just that safety blanket of, you know what, we need a guy that's going to be here every single day. This lineup hasn't been together. The pitching staff's been banged up. There's been a lot of injuries going on. And Baez, bring him in, and whatever happens, happens, and we'll deal with it in the winter. We'll see if he comes back. I don't know. I think the Cohen point about him giving Lindor that money, that's a premium point. How can we ignore the money he just handed out to Lindor? So I think Baez, he's going to ask for a lot of money. We can have that debate too. Who out of these shortstops is going to make the most? Correa, Baez, Seager, right? We don't know, right? Story. But the point is that Baez is in that category. And I think that with the Mets, it's going to be a big, big ask. If someone, whether it's general manager, someone in the front office, is going to go up to Steve Cohen and say, we need to re-sign him, there's going to have to be a lot of convincing done, I think, for them to bring back Baez.
I don't doubt that one bit. It hurts to hear say, but you guys are both bringing it. Like, there's really no argument to it, aside from you do know that Baez is willing to play second base, and he demanded to only play second base for Francisco Lindor. But when it comes to money and all that, everything gets tied up. But you did mention another shortstop in the league who also got traded. He wasn't the main piece of this trade, but let me tell you, he was a two-way for sure. And that's Mr. Trea Turner, who got traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers. He has brought exactly what they needed to repeat and become reigning World Series champions, in my opinion. He brought that little bit of speed they were missing due to Mookie Betts having his hip injury and not being able to, run, steal the bases, lead off like he usually does. And he also brought in batting average. He's batting .313. It's a little down from where he was in Washington, but hey, it's .313. You'll take it. He's also got 3 home runs, 9 RBIs. You don't expect the power from him because he is an average hitter, but he brought the 5 steals with him as well. what do you think of, aside from, his teammate Mad Max taking over the entire Dodgers rotation, how do you think this insertion of Trey Turner has been for them? Is he an upgrade they needed in the field, or was this more of just a luxury that they love to have added?
I think right now, and I'm talking literally in the moment, it's a luxury. Next year, the year after, and the year after that, that is a necessity. That trade told me that Corey Seager probably not going to be an LA Dodger next year. That's what that told me exactly. And you can add in Scherzer as well. It also told me they don't expect Bauer to be back this year. So there's two things. It's Seager not being back next year, Bauer not coming back this year. You insert Scherzer, you insert Turner. And now you're looking at the Dodgers and you're going, wow, I mean, you're talking about 2021. These guys are serious about repeating. They're sick and tired of hearing about all the people saying it was a shortened season, that wasn't a real championship. They've had enough of that. They made the blockbuster of all blockbusters. And with Trey Turner, this has been a player who I felt has been underrated forever. And finally, he's going to get under the bright lights in LA. I'm really happy for him. They needed that at the top of the lineup. Absolutely. You were going to see scenarios where Max Muncy might have had to lead off at one point. There was something about that. Bellinger can't hit anything this year. So you had to bring in another bat for sure, because I had my concerns about the Dodgers before that trade. I was saying, I don't know. There's a San Fran team very hungry. A Padres team, I know they've been really struggling in the second half, but you don't want to light a fire under them either, because they can take you out too. They're just as talented. So I thought it was a necessity for sure. But right now, though, you really look at it, luxury at the position for Trey Turner.
Jurg, I want to ask you, what's your thoughts on Trey Turner and Mad Max being added? Because I know before we had Logan, you were a huge fan of Washington. You were the leader of the Washington Trading All Their Assets fan club. So what do you think of, aside from, as we mentioned, Mad Max just dominating completely, what do you think is the best parts of Logan missed any of these two players being added to Los Angeles?
I think Logan hit just about on anything. I would only just add one extra thing to what he said. The Dodgers are not just looking, right now it's a luxury and they're looking to repeat. Kind of like Logan said, for next season, the year after, I don't think this is just for a repeat, guys. I think this is to get 3 championships within the next 4 to 5. Counting last season, I think this is for them to win multiple championships over the next couple of seasons. I really do. This wasn't just a deal for this season. Scherzer still under contract. Trey Turner, they're going to work it out. Like Logan said, Seager's going to be gone. Bauer, when they signed the deal, there's opt-outs after each season. Like, I'm sure they'll be able to get out of that, because that situation has just gotten to a point where it keeps getting extended. Longest extension I've ever seen of one of these cases, I think, in recent history when it comes to the sports, of just like guys getting into these situations, is just something where you wonder we wondered a little bit for the Dodgers. It's like, dang, you missed Bauer, Seager. I think he got hurt again this season at some point. He just wasn't playing well. It's like, all right, there's a little bit of holes in this armor of this amazing team that we see, and this is where the real luxury is. How nice must it be to just, okay, we lost Bauer, Seager, we may lose. Let's bring in a Turner and a Scherzer real quick here, and you bring what Turner's doing. Scherzer's 5-0 with a 1.05 ERA and 63 strikeouts just with the Dodgers, and a whip of 0.767. Like, this dude's looking like the Cy Young winner again. He's put himself in the Cy Young conversation. Like, in the second half, is just next level what he's done. Like, just a refresh for him. I was a big fan of it, and the Nats, they got a very nice haul back for these two guys. And this is one of those deals where it's like, for the Nats, you got what was the number 1 and 2, or like the number 2 and 3 prospects in the Dodgers farm system, who teams have been coveting for the last 2 trade deadlines. And for the Dodgers, like I said, this is not just for 1 more championship. This is for 2 more. This is for, in the next 4 years, they want to still be in the World Series convo. That's what these guys are. So heck yeah, I was a fan of it when it happened, and I'm still a fan of it right now, because I'm 1 for 3 right now. I said all 4 champions from 2020 were going to repeat. The Chiefs family, the Lakers family, Tampa Bay's got my back. I need the Dodgers to have my back, man. I need it. So yeah, I'm going to be cheering for it. But just like you're talking about pure power moves in baseball, like the Dodgers, they're the brokers. They're the brokers of that. They've taken the Yankees' role over the last decade. They really have. Yeah, and you know what? They also stole that trade, Scherzer and Turner, maybe. Scherzer for sure, from the Padres. Because it was reported, I think, my time, Eastern time, 4 o'clock,
Scherzer's close to going to the Padres.
We saw the same. We saw the exact same thing.
There you go. And then what happened later in the day? Dodgers, out of all the teams. It's pretty crazy. So that there's two sides to it. It benefits their own team, and it locks up their division. I mean, the Padres have been playing pretty pedestrian since that happened on July 31st.
It's the ultimate pettiness, and I love it. You know, when sports are petty, it's the best thing because it's just pure entertainment.
This is the petty episode of the Bunts and Bruises podcast when it comes to talking sports.
So speaking of petty, we're going to go ahead and talk about the person the Yankees should have gotten because we've mentioned him multiple times in this show. He will be the last player we talk about, and that's the man we were preaching at the top of our lungs to be leaving Minnesota and come here to New York because he would help dominate and help win a World Series, but unfortunately, Brian Cashman has not listened to Bunts and Bruises. If he did, he would have made the move. And that was for Mr. Jose Berrios. While he has not been the greatest player in his trade to the Blue Jays, he's had a 3.79 ERA in his 7 games started. He's 3-2. But he has been that player that they needed. He injected another player into the starting rotation that was missing there because all they really had was Ryu. So I'm going to throw it to you, Logan. What do you think of Jose Berrios? Was it really a move they needed? Because when he was in Minnesota, he was pitching at 3.48 ERA, so he's pitching slightly worse. And should the Yankees have pulled the trigger, or do you think they're doing all right? Because Mr. Jameson Taillon, he became the AL Pitcher of the Month once or twice since the trade deadline.
That's right, yeah. And the way I look at it in my mind is, okay, the Padres lost out on Scherzer. So then they probably were looking at Berrios. And
I said the same thing.
Right. And you know what? The Blue Jays came in and they outbidded everyone, and rightfully so, because they paid a hefty price to get Jose Berrios. Very hefty. Austin Martin is a prospect renowned around baseball. And again, every team has their own rankings. I'm not saying that everyone loves them. And Simeon Woods Richardson, who was actually playing for Team USA at the Olympics in Tokyo. So those are two high-end prospects. Very hefty price for a pitcher in Jose Berrios, who has never actually lived up to that Cy Young label that we all thought he would have with the Twins. He just hasn't lived up to it. And it's unfortunate. He's a really good pitcher. I think he's a really good number 2, a World Series number 3. But to be an ace and number 1, I don't see it right now. He hasn't lived up to it. Toronto does have one more year of control with him. So that's the positive there, but it was a hefty price. And if the Yankees don't make that trade, I can't blame Brian Cashman at all. That's real pricey. They went the cheap route getting Andrew Heaney, who's now in the bullpen, but that's a hefty price for Berrios. I just wouldn't be able to do it if I was Brian Cashman. They already gave up a lot of quantity, we have to remember, in the Gallo trade.
Yeah.
A lot of prospects went to Texas. They didn't give up top-end prospects, but they gave up a lot, right? It was a quantity trade. I just didn't think they had the capital to necessarily do it.
I think the biggest factor of those 2 trades they made for Rizzo and Gallo as well was I'm almost positive they're paying almost none of the salary for those 2 players as well. So, you know, to end up having to grab Berrios, like you said, and he only has 1 more year of control, he's going to have a hefty price tag. He's, like you said, he's a World Series number 3 starter. He's a good, solid 2. He's not that ace, but he's going to demand ace money because some way, I could see him going to Tampa. I could see him going to the Astros, and all of a sudden he figures it out and becomes that Cy Young winner. Jurg, you were part of the train, the bandwagon, the train, whatever you want to call it, of my man's being shipped out. You have any final thoughts on how he landed and how he's been playing as of late?
I'm the league leader in demanding players get traded and they get moved. I take great pride in that. But in all seriousness, like he's played relatively fine in Toronto. Like you said, the stats, relatively speaking, have been just about the same as they were in Minnesota. Some a little bit better, some a little bit worse. So if you're the Blue Jays, when you look at that, it's like, okay. But I think what the Blue Jays wanted to do here is they wanted to make it clear to all their young players, and it's never a bad thing to do this early. They wanted to make it clear to Biggio, Bichette, and Vladdy. A lot of 90s fans got confused when I say those names and not add the junior, by the way. That's why I want to do that. Like, a lot of people, like, they don't understand in all sports, and maybe not so much in baseball and hockey, funny enough, because it's just not structured that way. But you need to show your players early. It's like there's a commitment to wanting to win here and to build a winner. And I think that's what the Blue Jays wanted to do in this deal. And heck, the bragging rights of, hey, we outbid the Yankees and the Padres for this guy, like that, you could take a little bit of pride and solace in that as well. I think from that perspective, I think you could argue, yes, they did pay a pretty penny. Like Logan's absolutely right. They paid a pretty penny to Minnesota, and it was a great pickup for the Minnesota Twins, as they probably are going to have to rebuild here soon. But kind of like what I'm alluding to here, like Minnesota just had a 2-3 year window where they did nothing with it. They didn't even win a playoff game. The Blue Jays, while they have the talent for their window, should be in theory a longer period of time. We thought of that about the Cubs, right? And look what happened this season with that. What needs to be understood in sports is that your window, this as quickly as it opens, it will get shut on you just as fast, if not quicker. Because back in 2016, ask any Cubs fan after winning that World Series how many more World Series appearances they were going to have over the next 5 seasons. And then 5 years later, the 3 main pieces on that team offensively are all gone. So when you consider that, I don't, and of course, for Toronto, it's a little bit different because their guys are younger. They haven't hit that stage yet. They have plenty of team control left on those youngsters. But it's about, not wanting to waste any time. So from that perspective, I actually like the trade because I'm a big fan of teams not wasting their window. I really am. Now, in terms of like your other question of like, should the Yankees have done it? I think part of me says yes, part of me says no. I think Logan mentioned they gave up a lot of quantity in the other 2 deals. And it's like, what were you going to give up here with Berrios? Like you said, just the 1 year left of team control. You're going to have to pay him. But at the same time, it's also like, well, and I agree with Logan. I actually think we need to use this in other sports more. Berrios, you hope he's an ace, but he's a number 2 regularly. But on a World Series team, he's your number 3. Like, we need to have that perspective on a lot more players on a lot of other sports. Because I'm telling you, a lot of you NBA fans you kind of don't know what you're talking about with some of the moves your team's make. But irregardless, in terms of Jose Berrios itself, like with the Yankees, with Garrett Cole there, he'd be the number 2. But then with how Jameson Taillon's been playing, then maybe could you put him as your 3 in the playoffs? And then it becomes that number 3 on the team. So that's where I'm very 50-50 about. Same thing with the Padres as well. Like the lineup they could have had with Snell, Darvish, and Berrios. Like just the possibilities are fun, right? Like it's fun to look back and play with that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like I don't fault Toronto for making the move because they want to show their young guys early here. It's like, hey, we want to compete. And I think unless he just has terrible starts, which is a possibility, I'm not ruling it out, but unless he just has like terrible starts, like he's going to play a key role here in the home stretch because the Blue Jays are a couple games out of the wild card, and look who holds both wild card spots right now. It's the Yankees and the Red Sox. How much we're talking about pettiness, we're talking about bragging rights. How much would Toronto Blue Jays fans love it if they could take away the wild card spot from one of the big brother teams in that division?
That's a division that you can look to, like the NL West almost. I mean, there's 3 teams that can make the playoffs there. And with the AL East, it's really looking like the same thing. Tampa's going to win the division, and then you got 2 AL East teams battling it out. I don't want to ignore Seattle or Oakland because they're really making a push too. But yeah, Yankees-Red Sox wildcard game, I think if you're just a pure baseball observer, you don't really have a rooting interest in anybody, how can you not love that? Yankees-Red Sox wildcard game. By the way, guys, Red Sox never been in a wildcard game in their history. So it could happen this year. And it might be against the Yankees. So how about that?
It's only right that would happen. It's only right.
All right, fellas. And to wrap up our baseball segment, who doesn't make the wild card out of the 3 teams? Because something tells me they're not all going to make it. So who gets knocked out? Is it going to be the Yankees, Boston, or Toronto? Logan, let's go with you.
I think it's going to be a Yankees-Red Sox wildcard game. Toronto's the hottest team in baseball right now. They're 9-1 in their last 10 games. They're really playing well. There's just concerns about the bullpen I don't like that have lingered all year long, and I think it's going to be a problem in these final 2 weeks. I think the Yankees are going to turn it around. They won 13 games in a row. They're kind of struggling now, but they're going to get hot again. I know they are. The lineup's just too good. And Boston, it's tough with Boston because they've been a team that you thought they could win the division this year. And they went in such a bad route, almost like the Padres did. I still think they're going to find a way to get in, though. I trust Alex Cora. This is why they brought him in, back as manager for moments like this. So for that, Yankees-Red Sox wildcard game.
Jurg?
While I do think it will be Yankees-Red Sox, I want to be a little bit unique. I want to say it's going to be a Yankees-Blue Jays wild card game because I think of those 3 teams, honestly, the team I have the least confidence in with their pitching is actually the Red Sox. Yep. Like, they were a team early on, and we criticized this about them early, James, like back in season 1 consistently. Like the biggest concern was pitching with the Red Sox. And now we're coming this late into the season, and we still have those questions now. Like they had, just like the Giants, like the first 50, 60 games of the season, the Red Sox and the Giants were the 2 surprise teams. And since then, the Giants have more than held up their end. The Red Sox haven't, right? So it's getting to that point where it's like, are they going to make it? And while they have like, I think it's 2.5 or 3 game edge right now over the Blue Jays, one bad half week. Like they have a bad weekend here coming up, and the Blue Jays keep on playing well, and it's a completely different picture. And this time it's the Blue Jays flying high and the Red Sox going low. So I personally, like, I just want to see, and again, like, I want to see the excitement. I want to see in a 1-game scenario in the wild card. I want to see Garrett Cole have to pitch against those youngsters. I want to see Vladdy Garrett Cole in a 1-game playoff. Let's go. So that's going to be my pick.
That's what I like to hear, Jurg. That's what I like to hear. All right. So as Jurg always likes to say, he's the intro, he's the starter, and I'm the Mariano Rivera of here. I'm the closer. So Logan, just want to thank you one more time for joining us. Let the people know where they could check out your work. Let them know where they could check out your tweets, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, whatever you want, man. Throw it in there.
You can get me at Twitter at LGL Lockhart, and through there you can find out where to read, watch, and everything. Guys, thank you so much. It's always so much fun coming on with you two. And good luck to the Mets, James, really. I was getting worried there because last time we talked, we were saying they're going to run away with the division. They're going to fight. They're going to fight, but I'm wishing you luck.
I appreciate it, Logan. I'm still worried. We got on this little win streak, but now I'm still sweating. The moment the GOAT went down, it was like, we lost it.
There you go.
But regardless, Jurg, any last words to the people for this week?
Hey, just follow us on Bunts and Bruises at Twitter. We're 5 away from 100, guys. Help us get there. Like the road, there's milestones to these roads, and OTBN just reached 1K. We want to get to that level one day, but before we get to 1K, we got to get to the good old 100. We got to get to the Benjamin. So help us get there, y'all.
Please, and I promise we'll start being more active with it. We were just using it to retweet the show and whatnot. You guys could follow us, Bars Talks and Jurg K40. But we're going to start being more active on our actual page. Make sure to follow us on YouTube. Follow us Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Like, subscribe, review, all that good stuff. Fast forward, give me my view, please. I promise I'll check your stuff out too. Regardless, we got week 2 coming up of season 2. It's going to be even twice as – it's going to be hard to make it twice as good as this episode. But we're going to try our best. Logan, once again, thank you for joining us. Everyone else, we'll see you next week on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Peace.